Awesome. I've been on a, I've been doing a lot of grapes, been eating a lot of grapes, and it's the season for that, so it's fun.
Okay.
I don't want to interrupt. You just started recording, so I'll let you do the intro, but then I actually do have a question, so.
Okay, sure. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another weekly meetup. And here we can talk anything sCrypt related or not, in general, or BSV, anything you want to talk about. So I think for new people here, like Bill, do you want to just go with a very short introduction and we can then go from there?
Sure. I didn't hear what you said, but you wanted me to just say something, right? So
yeah, just
I'm in New
short
York.
introduction. Yeah.
Sure. I'm in New York. I'm a developer. I love what you're doing. I'm using sCrypt or sCrypt, however you pronounce it, and it's very, very powerful. And I'm going to be a coin geek, and I hope to meet anyone else who's there. And I'm building, and I'm looking forward to seeing what you guys are building. So
cool.
Hi.
Is there any concrete project you are working on, or is it just learning and exploring at this moment?
I'm working on something. It's still in stealth mode. I'm hoping 6 months, something like 6 months to reveal. But basically, it's like a identity / browser thing.
Oh, okay, cool. It's not Brave, right? Okay, I know.
No.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, sure. Kevin, you said you have something to get the ball rolling?
Yeah, so yeah, I was doing the I was going through the learn.script.io and stuff, and which is helpful. One of the things though is I'm wondering with storing state in BSV. I know that we use the op push transaction, and we have all this stuff from the previous transaction. But from my understanding, what's happening is that the address is constantly changing of the so-called contract, because I get it and then I pass it to you, and then you pass it, maybe you change something and then you pass it to the next person. But is there a way of keeping track of the latest version? Does that make sense? From like the outside, like in Ethereum,
Yes.
you'd have an address, and you see what I mean? So is there like, maybe in this paradigm, it's a little bit different, but is there a way of keeping track of where it is?
Yes, it's a very good question. I think a lot of people have been asking about this, so I'm glad you brought it up. So basically, that cannot be done at the base layer, because as you mentioned, right, we have a UTXO model, which is different from account model, which Ethereum and a lot of other blockchains has. Basically, is a fixed address. But for us, think about it's a UTXO, right? Every time you spend it, it goes to the next one. So it's not like a one-time thing. So I think this we already have somebody. I think Attila already does something along this line. Basically, you can think about let's just think about the simplest example, right? You have a state. You have it's always in a single UTXO. When you update it, you just go to the next one, you spend again, go to the next one. So you pretty much, it's a chain, right? So you always want to know from even from the beginning or any in between, you want to find the tip of the chain at any moment. So they provide a service. Basically, you can almost think about indexing. So you can give it, let's say the issuance, usually people call it the issuance transaction. So you can basically it's a API. You give it the starting UTXO, and it will tell you what the latest one is at. So it has to be building some kind of like a upper layer indexing service built into. Does that make sense? I think it's a different model, but it just doesn't mean.
Does. And with Ethereum, there's the talk that they could just build Ethereum on top of BSV. And so I had the idea that it's probably possible, but yeah, it has to be done at a different layer or something. So
yeah, that's a very efficient way. I think a long time ago, I wrote an article. I don't think it's doable, but it's mostly for like more for trolling than the real implementation. Basically, I point a way, right? You can efficiently implement Ethereum on top of BSV today. That you can do everything. Basically, you embed that. They have a global state, right? Because we have also have a stateful contract. So you can put the global state as a state. So every time you have a new Ethereum transaction, you just update the UTXO and keep going. And the good thing is, we even have a way to kind of using again Merkle tree to store only you don't have to store the whole big table. I mean, that's big, right? I think they are like maybe 1 terabyte or something. I don't know exact number, but you don't have to store the whole state. You can only store like the Merkle path. So that make it much more efficient. And at that time, I do the calculation. So on the average size of transaction and the average fee rate from BSV, turns out it's like I think 100 times cheaper than if you transact on Ethereum. Basically, you do a wrapper. You can actually do it if you want to really have some fun. But why would you do it? So, that's another different. This is a different story. Let me send the article.
Yeah.
You're saying?
Yeah. But so it wouldn't necessarily be that you're building Ethereum on top. It would be more of like a assistance layer or something to make it more efficient. I don't know. I don't know. I need to understand it better, but I just read I read the article and took it kind of at its base. I need to understand it better before I talk about that more. But yeah, I mean, I just need to understand, because the important part was just the location of, a contract, and it's constantly changing in the UTXO model because you keep on passing it off and it gets to be a different UTXO. And so I just need to either accept that as just the way that it is, or have some sort of way of tracking where the current state is. So, yeah. And so usually, give a link to that person that you talked about, the API that does that.
Okay, yeah, I will also send all this.
One way of...
Go ahead.
Sorry. Yeah, no, I was going to say that one way of actually tracking state for transactions is simply to require or have some sort of, or to insert yourself into the middle of the broadcasting of the transaction, meaning that you require all your clients to submit the transaction to you for broadcast, or to architect your application in such a way.
Yeah, that's one good way. Yes.
Yeah. If you do that, then you can simply use a regular SQL database. That's what I'm doing at the moment, to stick all your transactions in an SQL database. This way, you're always keeping track of all the transactions. And then you have regular... Yeah.
If they're dependent upon you, it's just dependent upon you? What do you mean dependent upon you for broadcasting? So they would, I'm looking at it from like a server. They'd say to your server, okay, broadcast this transaction.
Yeah, you can do it. You can do it one of two ways, right? So let's say you have an in-browser wallet, a bit of JavaScript in a wallet on the client side running there. Once the transaction is actually being broadcast, let's assume that you're broadcasting the transaction directly from within the client-side application in the browser. You can then connect to an endpoint with a miner, but at the same time, you can send the same transaction over I was going to say Ajax, but Ajax is, nobody says Ajax anymore. over a RESTful request, like on API request to a server.
XML HTTP request, right?
Yes.
XHR.
It's so long to say that.
That's fine. We have all been there.
And it's not really XML anyway, so yeah. So I'm just going to say Ajax, right? So you can either, so one way is send it on to the miner endpoint, to the miner API with whomever to broadcast the transaction for you to actually send it on chain. But at the same time, send a copy of the same transaction to yourself. And then you just store that transaction. This is a good way of keeping track of all of the transactions that are being generated. The second way is just to broadcast the transaction to your own API backend. You can even do just something simple like a serverless endpoint, a little bit of Node or a little bit of JavaScript running inside a Lambda, AWS Lambda, right? And all it does is it bifurcates the transaction, right? It splits it. It sends a copy off for broadcast, and another copy gets passed on to your internal API for you to store in your database. The idea here is just to keep track of all the transactions that you generate within your application. And if you can do that, then you can essentially perform any sort of SQL query over the transaction, especially if you then do further metadata extraction on the transaction before you save it in your local SQL database. You can go a little fancy. You can use something like Neo4j, construct a graph database, and now you have a really nice graph data structure. But graph queries are slightly different, but it's massively efficient. So yeah,
Got it.
yeah, I guess the option, I don't want to elaborate, or sorry, I don't want to over emphasize the point, I guess.
Cool. Well, yeah, that helps. I'll study it more, but yeah, that was the big question that came up. I've had that question for a few, I guess, weeks or months, I forget, but that was helpful to ask. So thank you.
Yeah, there's an existing product. I believe it's called TXDB, and I'm gonna say Matterpool built it. Attila Aras from Matterpool.
Yeah, that's what I remember.
But yeah, and I might be getting the name wrong as well. I think it's called TXDB, but it's basically a transaction database. Yeah.
This ties in a little bit with some of the state machine stuff that I've been doing for a while as well with overlays. So I've created this thing called the Bridgeport Host Resolution protocol. And what it is basically a way for certain servers to advertise to the world, I accept and will track certain transactions in certain ways. So if I send a BHRP advertisement about my server, then anybody who wants to have those certain transactions tracked in the certain way according to the certain protocol that you're using can just send it to one of those servers that advertise, and then all of them are going to automatically broadcast to all other servers who also track that same transaction or that same sort of protocol. And so it creates an overlay network on top of Bitcoin, and it just sends all of them across. So you have on the mining layer, you send it to every miner, right? And then you have a way of tracking which servers are going to do which ones. And then because everything's deterministic and deterministically derived from the chain, everybody knows what everybody else should respond with for a given query, so they can keep each other honest, and they sign everything. So there's cryptographic proof if somebody lies. And so just thought I would, that's a kind of a thing I'm working on, and there's going to be more coming out about that. But yeah, we can do overlays on top of Bitcoin that kind of it removes the whole central server thing, at least to a point, by allowing multiple servers to kind of come up and leave and rejoin the network as they wish, I guess.
Great. I don't know if this is exactly, I'm gonna have to watch that back to fully understand it, but what you said reminded me of what I was listening to in Bitcoin class with Satoshi. And he said several times how you could have filters where, like, you know, is that kind of what you're talking about? Because I could assume, like, let's say that you have a specific contract and then it has a certain ID, whatever, that identifies it as that.
Yeah.
Then I assume that you could just be monitoring the network for that for that contract, and then
Mhm.
that's how you can keep track of the latest state. of
I
it.
was listening to that video, and the whole time I was thinking, God damn it, Craig, you had to make this public, didn't you? Because now I have to move much more quickly because other people are going to go build this now. I've been sitting on that for quite some time, and
You should
you
just
wouldn't, and that's a
you
good
should-
thing. That's a very good thing.
yeah, you should just pattern it before him. So that's another way to run it. So I think another way I've been thinking about it, because if you only put a single state into a giant UTXO, that's usually not the most efficient, right? Now you can also we can get a sense why Ethereum cannot scale well, because they only have one UTXO, right? Think about it. It is, right? It's a giant
The
table.
whole Ethereum is one UTXO.
It's one UTXO, right? So that's why
I knew they
everything-
followed the UTXO model the whole time.
Yeah, it's just they only have one, so you can still think. But here's the thing, right? Every update you can change, right? It's a shared state. Everything has to come into it. It has to be sequential. There's no way around it. It's not Ethereum 2 or 3 or that's not. It's like you're trying to reinvent and like break some physics law, right? You can. It's not possible. So for us, another way we can be more efficient. I think one way we talk to Stefan and Ty talk about. The other way is to, instead of have when you have some application state that you want to store on chain, one way is to put in a single UTXO. The other way is you also, it's like a native Bitcoin, right? So native Bitcoin, you also break into many so-called UTXO set, right? So instead of having just one single one, you can break it into multiple. So all of them, then they are independent, right? Then they can be updated simultaneously. I think some of the earliest token protocols based on sCrypt, they do it in this way. But they have some limitations, but that's a general idea, right? Because if you think about it, if you do layer 1 tokens, let's say fungible, the token is just a balance table, right? You have a owner, the two columns, the owner and the balance, right? So it's a state, and then every time you do transfer, you just move from Alice to Bob, and then you decrement Alice balance, increment Bob's, and it's atomic, right? So it's a perfect sound token solution, but the only drawback is you have to sequentially execute to transfer. You cannot transfer at 2 times, right? At the same time. So let's say you have break into 2 parts. So Alice has its own token UTXO, Bob has its own. So then Alice can transfer to whatever Charlie, and Bob can transfer to, I don't know, let's say Michael, right? They all can be independent. So that's the way I see it, fundamentally why the UTXO model is just a much scalable solution, right? But then how do you make it like how to track all of this? I think a lot of people, like even for the recent, for the sensible, right? Or even for some other UTXO based sCrypt tokens, they have this one. Yeah, so what you just discussed is like a filter. So basically they put a kind of like a tag, unique ID there. So when they filter, they can very easily identify those. They can know, oh, this is the transaction. Or as Stefan said, a lot of time you can also do it like almost like a peer-to-peer. You don't broadcast. You just, because you are like if you have some cases, you have single point of like a central server. So everybody can go through you, right? So you don't have to go and find the latest UTXO because you are the one who is generating the latest UTXO. So you don't have to, you know that already. So you don't have to search the whole blockchain for this. Yeah.
Got it. Cool. Sorry, I moved because I don't think I have good enough internet in there. It's choppy, but now it's clear again. But yeah, but so then that also reminded me, like, if you like, let's say that you run into like the double spend problem, I guess, with UTXO, because let's say that I have this contract that's at a specific state and I give it to you, but then before you do anything with it, I might give it to somebody else.
Yes.
Right. Is that possible? Yeah. And then,
yes, it's possible.
Then if there's multiple parties involved, then it might, but then I guess once the miners get to it, they're going to choose one chain. But yeah, I just have to wrap my head around this, how that whole thing would work.
Yeah, at service level, yes, you can. Actually, I don't know, have you guys been following this token swap? So recently they have some kind of growing pain. Sometimes they say, oh, why is my swap transactions not succeed? Actually, it's because a lot of them is just because exactly this problem you are talking about. Because they have, for the tokens, they store in different UTXOs. I think at one module, I think it's a liquidity pool, a swap contract. It's just within one UTXO. So when multiple users, right, they want to swap, they may have a race, right? So, but at the mining layer, there's no double spend because you cannot double spend. Right? But at a service level, they now do some kind of like a retry, right? So, but it's not you can have you have this exactly have this racing problem, but that can be done at the upper level. I feel, for example, when you submit, right, maybe all to the server, they can just you know, they can be the one who's responsible to organize the you know, rank all these requests, order all of them, right, and process it one by one. But this is much simpler than scaling the layer one, right? Because layer one, you want to make that as scalable as possible, but then it's like building on kind of service, right? Then there's much easier problem. It's just more like an engineering problem. Apply the, you know, you can, you know, horizontally scale, right?
It is possible. It is possible using layer using script natively to solve that by designating which person is to win all of the races, if you will. So two people broadcast and they're each spending the same UTXO, and I want to spend one, and you want to spend one. We can designate, if I'm to spend, then I'm to use certain sequence number, and if you're to spend, then you're to use a lower or higher sequence number. And in so doing, we can, every time we spend, it goes round robin, we each get a turn to have priority. But if I spend and you spend at the same time, but my sequence number is higher, then my spend goes through and yours always does not go through because it replaces. And so combining that with some lock time stuff, you can make it so that there's no need, if you will, to kind of centrally queue all of those things. Although having a central queue is ideal for other cases as well. It's just difficult because if multiple people are requesting the same, are requesting kind of from the central queuing server to spend the same UTXO at the same time, then that server has to basically tell one of them to wait because it can't give the same UTXO to multiple to spend at the same time. And then once it gets back from the first one, it has to then take that while waiting. Everybody's literally waiting on that first guy to sign and send it back, and then send it to the second one, and then everybody's waiting on him. So there's different ways to approach the problem, but I think that by and large, a solution is probably going to arise around, at least for contracts where all the parties are known, everybody can broadcast at any time. But if there is a race before, you know, person B or C or D sees the spend that person A made when person A has priority, then person A is just designated that, yeah, they're gonna always be the one to be able to spend. And then, you know, during the next iteration, it could then kind of, you know, every time the UTXO rolls forward, it could designate another person as the spend authority, if that makes sense.
Got it. Yeah, there's something similar back in the day when I was doing with iCloud. They had to do, like, you might have a thing on your iPad that's different than on your phone, that's different on your computer, and you have to choose one, and there's different conditions for which one goes through and stuff. So it seems like it's already sort of a problem that's been dealt with, but interesting. Cool. It always makes more sense when I watch this back. So I'm done with my questions, and I'll watch some of these answers again, and that's all I got.
I think, Ty, interestingly, you just what you propose is kind of like a sequence number. It's exactly what the Ethereum is doing, right? Nonce. Every account has this nonce.
Is that
every
the
time
nonce?
Increment.
Yeah, the nonce.
Yeah, that's how you order. So basically, you can put, when I say you can put the giant table into a single UTXO. That's what actually they are doing. So I don't want to talk.
Yeah, except for with Bitcoin SV, our entire thing doesn't have to run in one UTXO. I mean, we can do that, so we can emulate them, but we can also do 2.1999999 quadrillion other 2.099999 other quadrillion UTXOs one for each other Satoshi, and then we can have that one single Satoshi that represents all of Ethereum.
That would be fun. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we spoke about this last week, right? Around the idea, and because Ty, you mentioned this, right? That if you have all of your state contained in one transaction, that we actually discussed this exact problem where you end up with race conditions and the problem with where you're trying to synchronize the state amongst multiple participants.
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not gonna. You're gonna have a lot of retries if you're trying to send a lot of things out, but you will get one every single time because there's always going to be one. So, and that's the best possible. If you're stuck in that condition, that's the best possible thing that can possibly happen if you think about it, according to like Xiaohui said, like basically the laws of physics, right? So the best possible way of solving that is to have one go through at least every time, and then everybody just blasts out and then hopes, and then one of them goes through, and then they just keep going, and it really, really sucks. But I mean, if you're stuck in in one UTXO, then we do the best we can for you, I guess.
It's a lot like quantum tunneling, man. Like it sounds like you're the cat in the box problem, right? You don't know if the cat is alive or dead until you broadcast your transaction.
Yeah, you don't know whether it's settled.
Well, that goes into another.
Before your block is mined, you don't know whether your transaction goes through or not. So it's a both dead and living. Okay.
And then even with like I think it was Alex who was talking in MetaNet Slack recently about these Satoshi payment channels, and I wrote him a response in a direct message, and what I said was one Satoshi cannot manage multiple payment channels, but what it can do is if you are broadcasting one, the payment channel itself can represent all possible potential future states before it is settled, just like how a qubit, right? But then once you broadcast to the chain and settle on chain, one of the sort of states, one of the things that satisfies the constraints of that channel, then it collapses back down all of those potential states into one actual state, similar to the way that qubits, when you observe them, they collapse back down. And so that's interesting as another thing. So, right, the Satoshi payment channel and the possible potential solutions to it when it's open, when it's like available for when it's on chain to be redeemed, represents a potential future, or all possible potential future ways that it could be redeemed. And then once one of those ways becomes reality, and once it gets registered, then it collapses its state back down, and this sort of potential future state tree just gets linearized and made into a linear sequence of events that defines what is the actual thing that it actualizes it. So just another interesting tie back into the quantum ideas there.
Yep. I don't know if making the metaphor of using quantum, it's going to confuse most people, but I actually understood that because I remember that question. It's, what's the cat in the box? Is he in the box or is he not in the box? But then once you open it, you find out or something. Yeah, but yeah, I get what you mean. You have a bunch of possibilities, and then it collapses down into one possibility.
Right. That's what time does. That's what time does to everything. It just goes along and linearly how rude of it, right? It's going to collapse down all of our future potentials into one single thing and turn it into the past.
Yeah.
But that's how it works, and that's what Bitcoin kind of enables with these potential future state trees of possibilities and payment channels for things like the traveling salesman problem. So maybe if the BTC people actually want to do something and solve the TSP, they can do it on top of BSB because they can write a thing that allows people to do that for their LN, whatever the heck they're trying to do.
Yeah, I felt like in the Bitcoin or the Bitcoin class, that was one of the best examples of things that you could do. To do the traveling salesman, but economically incentivized. I feel like that has so many use cases.
Yeah,
I think this tree you are referring to is also in computational theory. It's called a non-deterministic Turing machine. Yeah,
Yeah.
That's one way to think about it. If you don't want to go into the quantum world, right? Yeah.
Cool, I'll Google it after this.
Some
Much
people
more
don't like to go
practical.
into the quantum world, and I don't blame them.
Mhm.
I guess one thing I could mention, just as you know, a different topic here, but definitely related to sCrypt. I've been, you know, I wouldn't say, I've been diving into sCrypt, but I haven't even hit the water yet. I've just jumped off the diving board, so still learning the basics. One of the things I'd like to mention is that in terms of just some of the I guess pain points or things as a new developer. When I'm creating contracts and such, intuitively, it feels like a couple things. I would want my, throughout all of the different iterations as the UTXO kind of propagates forward, I would want my member variables to automatically, you know, serialize and deserialize in such a way that I don't have to worry about all of the logic of putting them in at the end and then having to pull them back out. I think that could be handled potentially. And maybe there's a way of adding another keyword or something that makes it do that automatically.
That's,
but that's one thing.
That's exactly what we are working on right now at this moment. So we have
Very
something
good.
coming for you.
I'm very
So-
glad to hear that.
Okay.
Okay.
So we didn't plan this.
Yeah, people are gonna
That's
really
good.
like that.
Okay. Yeah, that's
Mhm.
one of the number one user requests from us. So I think we'll have something probably next week. If not before CoinGeek. Yes.
Very cool.
Okay, keep
And
going.
another thing I was thinking, another thing I was just kind of thinking about was when I think right now we have this principle where we can redeem the contract by putting the right things in the unlocking script, and then it just kind of unlocks the contract and allows it to kind of move forward. But for doing more advanced computations, including things like for loops, where you don't know how the loop is going to run, you don't have to unroll it every time, because right now you have loop and then you unroll into the opcodes for all the potential, you know, future things that could potentially happen during that loop. If we wanted to do for loops and you have an example contract of doing a for loopy type thing where you can kind of roll the UTXO forward. But if we integrate those into the flow of existing code in such a way that we're not necessarily redeeming or spending the contract just by unlocking the one locking script, but whenever we encounter a loop, it kind of puts the UTXO into this secondary looping state where we run through and we redeem by running each iteration of that loop. And then once that loop is done, we can just continue on down the file by executing the next statements after it. So that way we can natively do things like for loops inside of sCrypt by having multiple transactions as a native way to sort of redeem or unlock the UTXO. And so I don't know if you're working on that, but that would be another very powerful thing. And it would really, I think, you know, one of the main things is, oh, you can't do for loops, but you can. It's just, you know, if we incorporate some of these multi-transactional flows into the ability of redeeming contracts, I think that would be very powerful, especially in conjunction with the other thing I mentioned earlier about having these states kind of stick around.
Just a quick answer. Basically, we already have one, like I don't know whether the one you mentioned is the one I thought of. Basically, in the boilerplate, we have one like I think it's called loop library, right? So it kind of does that, but it's not building at the language level. It's kind of building as a library on top of it. So we can always do. So if you know when you are doing loops, you know the upper bound, you can always unroll within the sCrypt level that's already been done. But if you want to have something like unlimited, you don't know it in advance, right? For example, you are doing, let's say, modular inverse or Turing machines, right? I don't know whether you have seen the latest article, right? Turing machines.
I did.
A lot of times you don't know how many times you're going to loop, right? Or you may never stop, right? For some language, undecidable. You can keep it forever.
Right. Yeah.
So for that case,
Yep. You can keep spending money until you're broke.
Yeah, or the universe dies of a heat, expands forever.
Yeah, heat death.
But
Yeah.
heat death. So basically, two ways. If you have determinists, you know how many times you can loop. You can put in a single. That's like a single transaction, right? But if you want to have a, non-deterministic, I think that you don't know in advance. One way would be always to you unroll it in transactions. So that's just a different dimension. I think a lot of people, when they say it's not turn complete, I think Craig's been talking about for like since like, I don't know, 2016 at the conference, right? Yeah, with Nick Szabo, right?
With Nick Szabo, I watched that panel. Yeah.
It explicit. You don't have to loop within the script. You can always have outside system, which is make the whole Bitcoin system. I think we have the library, but yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. No, please finish your thought. I don't want to interrupt, Sohan.
That's fine. Keep going.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, to add to that point about looping on the outside, right, is that the interesting way that I would do that is that if you use something like oppushTX combined, which basically means that you essentially have your computation fixed. In other words, you're enforcing the inner loop of your computation to always be executing the same code, but your inputs can vary because you're going to continuously change with a new input, right? So if you think of the what oppushTX constrains on the code part as the inside of the loop, and the spending, or rather the unlocking script, the inputs from the unlocking script as being the parameters that get passed into it. What you essentially achieve there is that you are enforcing a deterministic computation with variable outputs, which will always have a deterministic outcome, meaning that you can externalize the cost of the computation that will result in a deterministic result every time, which is a way, for example, of getting people to solve computationally hard problems by having the computationally hard problem encoded in script. And the only way to actually resolve the computation is by having the inputs that can only be achieved after having run the computation. And that computation can then be off-chain on a GPU or wherever. And once you have computed the correct result, which corresponds to the unlocking conditions, meaning that you're duplicating the code, you're duplicating the code that is on the code part of the oppushTX, you're duplicating that code externally because you have to. And then you run that external code. And then the only way that you can actually end up spending that is if the code, if your unlocking condition has a terminal condition in the loop, where the loop will terminate if, as and when a certain result has been achieved. And then basically you end up with a computation that can be paid for by outsourcing it, essentially, if you want that. And I think Craig has spoken about this as well, right? How we can outsource computation. It might have been in one of the Satoshi classes, how to outsource computation. I can't quite remember.
Okay, we have two Williams just joined the house. Two Williams, that's good. Welcome, guys. Okay,
I
Stephanie.
think that, yes, at least for me, that didn't make sense.
Yeah,
I think it's the same, William.
It's the same. Oh, okay, my bad. Okay, maybe that's quantum, I don't know, entangling happening that from two universes. Anyway, we'll see. Okay.
Trademark of Zoom.
Okay, so I think you just talk about we talk about one way. I think I'm going to send the library. I don't want to interrupt now, but basically we have one guy in our Slack, Pascal. He did this like a for loop unrolling, like a library. So I can share it, and then Ty and Stefan, anyone who's interested can take a look. and see if there's anything that's we can more simplify. If this is something feature, we'll have something that can be more much easier to work with. Okay, that's one thing. The second thing is I think Stefan, you also just touched upon it. So a lot of times on the blockchain, right? So I don't know, maybe happen in the future, but my sense is probably even 50 years or 100 years later, when people do like a real-time chatting, they don't have to process everything on chain, right? So a lot of times I think about blockchain is it's a verifier. So it's much easier. I think it's almost like a hashing. So when you want to find the right nonce, it's very hard. But once you find it, it's very easy to check. So a lot of time we just have to verify and do the complex stuff off chain. For example, right? For example, even in some example, I use a matrix, and sometimes I want to inverse the matrix, right? But if you know if you have an n by n matrix, I think it's n cube or something to inverse it. I forget. I don't know. Maybe someone you know. But it's much easier to just verify, right? So every time you want to inverse, you just pass the other matrix from the public function based on the unlock script, and then you only have to verify. That's like n squared. That's much easier, right? Same for maybe you want to calculate modular inverse. You want to find for x, you want to find y such that x times y modular some big prime number equals to y, right? So usually there's a hard problem, but you can always pass the y, and then you can just check it. That's very simple because you do multiplication and modular. And for sCrypt and Bitcoin script, everything is big integer, right? You don't have to even worry about overflow, underflow. That's much easier. So that's one trick we can I always keep in the back of my mind. The same for the elliptic curve library we just published, right? So they have a modular. When you do the elliptic curve point addition, they do a lot of complex arithmetic in modular, right? But a lot of time we just pass the correct answer and just verify it. So instead of doing like a modular division, you can just do multiplication. That's very simple. So another way to simplify is, so you can always, for a lot of time, you can pre-compute stuff off chain. So you don't have to do it on chain. So one of the examples we did is for example, for the output transaction. So there's some parameters there you can do. I think it's a K number, is K or public key or private key, right? So you can already pre-compute them. For example, there's a number, I forget, just give one example, maybe K, let's say you have to calculate private key divided by K, right? Because you know both, you don't have to do this in script. You can always do it off chain, right? And then you put it there. So that's another reason. So always when you think about how to simplify, to optimize your own chain footprint, also to minimize fees, right? You can always have this trick. This is like a generic universal tricks you can always play. First, only verify, see if it's much easier to directly compute it. Second, always think about ways where is there something you can always compute off chain. So you can only put the result, you don't have to do it on chain. So just a high level. I think this trick we've been playing for for many times. Yes.
Yeah, no, I think that actually makes a lot of sense, right? And it sounds like a pretty valuable trick, which to me in summary sounds pretty much like anything that is easy to verify but hard to calculate, do the computation off chain, and the easy part, which is the verification.
It even have the name, right? That's an MP problem, right? You see what I mean, right?
Yes.
That's exactly MP. You just described MP. So MP problem, that's most our practical problem are MP problem. So that's I don't know whether Satoshi, when he designed script to be a predicate, maybe that's already has this in mind. So you never want to solve, for example, you don't want to solve, let's say, traveling salesman, but you can always verify is, the sum is less than something, or it is there's a let's say Hamilton cycle within this graph or something. So you never want it directly, whether there's a click, whether this graph is a click, right? You don't know, but no, you don't know. It's very hard to find, but once you tell me, I can verify it very easily. Always polynomial.
Yes. I want to quickly mention something, an insight that I had a while back, right? It was the fact that I don't know if any of you guys program in Haskell or have ever looked at the Haskell programming language.
Yeah.
Haskell is a purely functional programming language.
Yeah, just a disclaimer. Our compiler, sCrypt compiler is written in Haskell. So.
Oh, nice. I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's not public.
Okay.
So.
All right.
Okay.
So.
Keep going.
So Xiaohui will know what I'm talking about when I say that Haskell doesn't have a looping construct either. What it does have is if you want to loop, you have to perform recursion. The only way to actually loop over any input is to use a recursive function. There's a specific version of a tail recursive function. Sorry, specific version of recursion called tail optimized recursion. I'm not going to say too much. I'm going to throw the words out there so anybody watching can do a bit of research into this. But the idea with so nobody will make the claim that Haskell isn't Turing complete, as obviously sCrypt, the compiler, is built using Haskell, right? But the interesting thing that I find analogous to the fact that Haskell, which doesn't have a direct looping construct or a loop keyword, and the only way to loop is actually to employ recursion, is the fact that the recursive step of the loop to me looks a lot like looping over the transaction in Bitcoin, meaning that it appears to me a lot like what the recursive function, the way a recursive function consumes input when you are looping on the outside of Bitcoin. And that analogy for me in my mind, once it clicked, that there was that looping over a transaction off chain, the way that we described, to me seems a lot like the way in which you would employ recursion in a purely functional language. Helped me in my understanding of how this actually works.
A great analysis.
So I just thought I'd mention that for anybody maybe watching this at some point in time.
Yeah,
the parallel definitely does make sense there. It really does seem in many, many ways like Satoshi was just trolling everybody who didn't actually understand some of these things about how things work. I mean, in so many different ways, right?
Register based or stack based. I see.
Yeah,
what's
there's
the
that,
latest video.
right?
Okay. Definitely.
But all those people that programmed the what is it, the
x86
fighter
whatever.
jets or something.
Mm-hmm.
Those people would be the people that programmed the stack-based, the ones that run forth the computers in some like fighter jets and things might have a job in a little while. So it might have been his tribute to those people, but everybody else, it's gonna be a lot of studying and adapting. And so it's a really great way of making sure that those computational theories and methods didn't kind of die out. Whereas I think they otherwise might have, just because of their lack of prevalence. I mean, until Bitcoin came along.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think just build on Stefan's Haskell observations. So I think there's a little bit background. When I first found out the Bitcoin script is functional, right? It's also function. There's no state, right? At the language level, because it's like a math function. You have a unlocking script, you plug in, it's like parameter, right? It's like an X square. It doesn't matter when you compute it, where you compute it, whether sequentially or in parallel, it doesn't matter. So at the beginning, right? So if you, Stefan, you just talk about Haskell. Haskell is also pure function, such as a lot of many other languages. So you know Haskell also have state, right? You can maintain state in Haskell, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
it's a weird thing. It's a weird way of doing it.
Now you think about it, it's actually the same with what Bitcoin is doing. That what we achieve, the state. For example, the counter, right? So basically, every time instead of you keep an internal state, so the way you keep everything still pure is every time you pass in the result, you mutate it, you return it again. So basically, you always carry like a context this state. So all the functions is still pure, but when you call it multiple times, because you are mutated inside, you always return the new state, right? And keep going. So for example, instead of fx, you carry the state, right? Fx state. So when you compute it once, you go to state, let's say 1, right? And then when you calculate next time, fx is state 1, right? Then you return not only y, but also state 2. So you just keep going. I think it's the same thing here, right? So in state 4, right? Not only you put the code, but also you put the state. So every single step is still pure, right? Because you just take the whole state and take the unlocking script. So every single step is pure, but when you look at in a row, it carries state, right? So I think that's a very, I think I got the idea from basically from Haskell to say that, yeah. And also it's pure, right? And also why a lot of people are very into functional nowadays is because as I think the software has been evolving for a long time, and same for hardware. But the only missing part a lot of time is super hard. I don't know how you guys are good at a multi-thread or parallel, writing parallel programs in like a imperative language like C++ or even Java, right? It's super hard. You have deadlocks, you have race conditions. It's almost impossible to debug or do even sometimes to reproduce it, because it's pure. Then it don't matter, right? It's like you are computing x squared, right? Then you are computing x squared from 1 to, let's say 1 billion. You don't care, right? You just you can have 1 billion machines. Each one just does its own thing. Which is what the UTXO is for. UTXO is like almost like kind of like a one core, and also the script is almost like functional, right? So you can do its own thing. It cannot be more parallelized than that, right? Because actually, if you have enough resources, you can throw one UTXO to one CPU just dedicated to process. You can have, I don't know how large is the UTXO set? I don't know, even 1 million or 100 million. You can have 100 million cores. You cannot be faster than this. This is the fastest machine, right? So just not of a
UTXO is perfect for MapReduce operations.
Yes. Yeah, that's why I joke around. I sent a tweet like some time ago. I said, forget about Ethereum. Sharding is already in Bitcoin since 0.1, right? Which is true, right?
We already have 2.1 quadrillion shards.
Shards, yeah.
So, it's sharding, yeah. MapReduce
it is sharding, right? But they are doing kind of different kind of sharding. I don't think I think even theoretically it will not work. But anyway, they are still trying to do it. It's like, to me, it's like they're pursuing this like a perpetual motion machine or something like a code fusion kind of style. It's even theoretically it's not possible, but somehow people just keep buying. I don't know, either they're not aware of it, or it's like the latest Twitter Lightning thing, right? So how does that work, right? So even for 7 billion people, if you have 5 transactions per second, do the simple math. So because for Lightning, right, you have to open a channel, right? So I think it takes like 30 years or something just for anybody just to open a channel. That's it. I'm not even talking about close it or anything. So even from theory, you cannot solve it. So I don't know. I don't know what are they doing.
On the bright side, it's keeping them busy and out of our way.
Yes, when your enemy is making mistakes, do not remind them. That's how I feel about this thing.
So the main takeaway of this talk is Bitcoin is Haskell and Ethereum is Python, right?
I tweeted something like that once.
I mean, Python
I got into a huge.
Craig has been
Python has the
about Python the whole week.
Interpreter lock, right?
Yeah, he has been complaining about the tabs versus spaces. Yeah. But that's another episode.
Sorry. Mihail, I actually tweeted something almost exactly like what you said once. Yeah. And the comments I got, oh my God, people were not happy.
I mean, it's really it. I mean, Python suffers from that global interpreter lock, right? And you can really do like parallelism on it. you have to spawn sub processes, and that's what I think shards are. Shards are sub processes. It's a whole nother chain, right? Yeah.
Side chain or layer 2, whatever you call it. It's all the coins. I think the opinions about the coins is very similar to language choices, or even like ID choices. It's like a lot of time I think it's not it's almost like I got a religious feeling about it, because it's just your favorite. But if you ask what's the reason, it's always like it may not always based on rational reasons. Yeah, that's what all I'm saying. But
No, absolutely. And somewhere in that thread, somebody is going to mention Hitler.
that's when you know you win, right? If somebody throw Hitler, you
be
won,
mentioning.
right?
I will be mentioning Adolf Hitler in my CoinGeek presentation. Believe it or not, I will work it in. You guys will see how.
Yes.
Oh no!
It's nothing bad or anything. But yes, I will.
Mel Brooks. Are you going to pull a Mel Brooks? Have you seen The Producers?
No. It's just it's actually just a comparison about how people behave, and good people versus bad people. And I'm using his as an example of a very bad and malicious person. But yeah, that'll be interesting. Comparing him against someone like Abe Lincoln. Yeah, he definitely there's some interesting things that go on in the belief systems around. I would say it is theological in nature why these people believe why these people believe in the leaders who tell them that certain things will work or that certain things will come about, and then they just don't. And so I don't understand it. I don't pretend to understand it, but I mean, we can just let them. We can just let them be, and if they're the last people on Earth to use the systems that we end up creating, then we've got 99.99% of people, and I'll be happy with that.
Aren't we supposed to be the cult members?
I guess it works both ways, but still, it's kind of ridiculous.
Yeah, exactly.
It's reflection, right? It's like I forget what the term is, where you're speaking
Projection?
with somebody and they're projecting. Yes, they're projecting onto you their sort of problems, and that's just interesting psychologically, even to think about those sorts of things.
Yeah, the latest
Yeah,
example,
this has
right?
been this whole industry. Go ahead.
Yeah, the latest example, right?
Latest example, you said.
When the Bitcoin.org somehow been hacked, and then Greg Maxwell immediately assumed it was cracked. So I don't know, maybe this is his thing. So he thought that everybody's against him. He do the same tactics. That's just a projection, almost by definition. Right? So, or maybe he's wrong. He's right, and Craig is actually hacking at Bitcoin.org.
I'm going to say I'm going to say it's a false flag attack by Greg Maxwell himself.
I wouldn't be surprised if they post.
I would not be surprised at that, or Cobra or somebody doing something.
Yeah, I was gonna say this whole industry is like a whole, at least in the past couple of years, has been a whole study on psychological projection. It's like, what? Like you listen to Vitalik's interviews, and it's like it's so baffling to me, because I don't know if he actually believes what he's saying or if he's not believing it and he's just truly malicious. But it seems like he believes what he's saying, but I don't know.
He believes. I think he
yeah,
must.
I think he believes.
I mean, he's got all this money that he made from it, and it's like this. I was watching this video about what is it? It was with Jordan Peterson and this guy who was talking about luxury beliefs, and like how these people who've made so much money from certain things can just be insulated away from the rest of everything, right. And so they can be led in, they can be kind of led to believe these certain things. But I wonder what, like, okay, so I guess mainly posing this question for people that have been around for a little bit longer than I have, which is, I guess, everyone here. I would assume. but like this industry specifically, like why this industry more than it wasn't like this when the internet was coming as a new technology, right? It wasn't like this when I mean, maybe the current wars in the 1890s where they, you know, they electrocuted the guy in the AC electric chair to prove a point, but nothing like this. Like, what the heck? Why is it this industry? And I guess was it this bad with other technologies as they were adopted? It was this bad?
The early days of the internet were just as bad. You had religious wars between Linux and Windows. There was this company called the Santa Cruz Operation, which was funded by in a similar way that there is this, what is this, COPA got set up to sue, to basically go after, Craig, I think it is. In the 90s, there was this company, the Santa Cruz Operation, which was also funded by competitors to some of the up and coming enterprise Linux service providers like SUSE Linux and Red Hat, who were basically suing these guys for copyright infringement, claiming that the Linux source code had actually Unix source code, because Linux and Unix are two separate development trees, right? But they claimed that Santa Cruz Operation essentially claimed copyright over the entire Linux code base as a consequence of code being supposedly stolen from BSD Unix, which they had acquired from Berkeley, or Berkeley Unix, which they'd acquired from Berkeley. And thereby, they were basically suing people and starting to chase after them for in essentially a copyright racket, where they were trying to get money from them. The Santa Cruz Operation lawsuits dragged on for a long time. People like Microsoft and Sun Microsystems and Oracle, everybody took sides on to try and defeat Linux, and threw money at SCO to help them defeat Linux in the early days of the internet. And that was just Linux that they went after, right? There were all these small little bun fights at the early days of the internet as well, even inside the Linux community itself, amongst distributions. So there were the distro wars. For
Ubuntu versus
Fedora,
whatever. Okay, that would be fun.
Yes. They used to call Red Hat wet crap. It was sort of a derogatory term for Red Hat Linux, right? So, but now Red Hat Linux is the premier Linux distribution for the enterprise. A common joke back then was when Linux went mainstream, all the die-hard Linux aficionados became BSD guys, because BSD has no users and they didn't like the crowd that came to Linux. But it's sort of a joke, right? But oh yeah, sorry Ty for ranting, for going off on an old man rant there. But yeah, it was exactly like it is right now.
And also from an investment level too, the internet bubble was, I mean, these companies were getting huge valuations, and there was this incentive with the venture capital where they all kind of knew it wasn't going to work, but they were making so much money that they just kept on doing it. So there's a lot of parallels to the internet bubble too, from an investment level, and I guess also from a technical level. But I don't know if that was before the internet bubble or whatever. But yeah, I think it's just once you establish a belief and then it gets funded somehow, and if you make a lot of money on that, then
validated, I think.
You're validated, and you have so much invested in this idea working that if it weren't to work, then you don't even consider it. And I think that's some of what's going on. It's like so much of their identity is built around this project. So I'm talking like Vitalik, so much of his identity and all of his wealth, I think he has like $1 billion now. Like it's all built on the premise of this thing working.
Right. Because
and to even consider.
Yeah, what are the ramifications
someone like Craig
if it didn't work? I mean, if it didn't work,
he'd lose all of his stuff.
It's like, okay, well, if this didn't work, then now I have $1 billion that I made that I shouldn't have made, and I was wrong, and now like my entire life is just, you know what I mean? It just completely it forces the person to go all the way back to question the first principles of pretty much everything if that happens. So
right, and that's such a ego blow that it's easier to deny, and also use your position to attack
because you're already
anybody
in a
that
position.
would go against it.
It's
Exactly. Yep. So I think that's the psychological thing behind it. But you also see that, I've seen that before with in medicine too. So it's anytime you have, a lot invested, people don't even consider the base premises anymore. So it's important to get the base premises right. That's why I always move very slowly. But even still, I'm sure I make mistakes. And I think it's something that we all do. But I think when you have so much money, it's the consequences are just more magnified.
That's one of the reasons why for the past year and a half, I've been going along without getting funding yet or anything, and just building stuff, because I think that's going to serve me well in the long term. And
I'm so glad to hear somebody else say that.
I mean,
because I've always been, I'm not against funding, but I'm always been hesitant for it, because you get so much, like, there's the investors are so invested in you. Sorry to use that word, but they really want you to succeed. Yeah. And but what if you don't really have something yet? But they're so eager, and especially in the tech industry, it's been so hot for the past 5 to 10 years. It's like, oh, you have an app, let me get you some venture capital. It's like, well, what if, like, if you look at Snapchat, they still are losing money. They don't have a profitable business. And I think it's like they've been slowly making progress, but they still have like a margin of like negative 30%. So they just are losing money. So it's not even a good business model. And yet it has billions and billions and billions of dollars that have been invested.
Well, the investors want to believe in the apps, and the apps also want to believe in the investors because of that. So they want these investors to believe that it's working, and they want to believe it's working. And so they almost lead each other on in a way that makes them believe that it's working, and that what they're doing is important and valuable and going to help the world and all this stuff. And they keep telling each other that. But
and so I've seen that dynamic, and I've always been hesitant. Like, wait, I don't know if I don't want to raise money. I want to have a profitable business, and then maybe like I'll raise money because it'll help me expand. But it's very refreshing to hear somebody say that, because there's so much pressure and it's hard to say no sometimes. So, hey, but I think it's the right thing to do.
You're turning money away. Send them my way.
Well, just people asking, so
I wouldn't,
not in a big way.
I wouldn't wish that money on anybody. So I will not send
it. I know. Think about it. It's like taking out credit card debt or something. It's like let's get a few $1 million of credit card debt and just hope things turn out. It's like, I don't know, it's maybe not the best idea, but
and lose equity too.
The way that I look at it, is that the way that I look at it is that from the point of view of the people who participate in both raising funding for their startups, as well as the people who do the investing, really what it comes down to is whether or not you have a credible proposal or a credible idea on how you're going to make money in future. And one of the most important metrics for any startup is traction, right? Can you drive, do you have a way of actually driving traction with your product? Can you drive predictable growth in your product? It's almost the way that it goes, right, is that people tend to think, and not quite unrealistically, that as long as you drive large user numbers to your platform predictably and consistently, that you can always pivot to a business model that does monetize well. And Twitter, for the longest time, same thing, right? Now finally they've started doing ads, so now they've become a bit more viable. But this business model of first trying to capture eyeballs, first trying to get traction in the market, and then pivoting towards a monetization strategy that works, is sort of the standard fare for the venture capital model when people raise large amounts of money.
Yeah, it is. I don't know if it's even, I feel like now with micropayments and stuff, there could be better business models because the whole capture and attention thing, it's just, I feel like it's met its end, or at least it's phasing out, because there's only so much attention we all have, and everybody being addicted to their phones. And now Apple has started to push back with the screen time stuff. And I think just the industry in general is trying to make it like, ideally my phone would just like, be in my backpack or something. Like I don't want to be on it all the time, but I do want it to help me when it's relevant. And so I think some of the things too that we've seen in BSV, like Baymail, I think it is, where you're able to do the prioritized inbox based on money, things like that, where, like, let's say that there's a certain value that I place on my time, and then only things that can break through that value actually get to me. And then there can be all sorts of automation to make the person know that, hey, he didn't read this message if it didn't get to him. Because there's just too much information right now. And I think it's like making people's, it drives me crazy. I had to change my number like years ago, and then just, put it on airplane mode all the time to find sanity, and even to get work done. This is back when I was really a iOS developer, and like really like cranking out apps. I just always have my phone on airplane mode. And but it was really rude, and people like didn't like that. And so there just needs to be a better way of managing people's attention in terms of like how much is your attention actually worth. And I think having the micropayments and having all this stuff could really help with that.
I like Matterpool's ideas, Daniel Krawitz's idea of proof of work, and rather than just tipping people, to attach proof of work to someone's comment or whatever, and using that as a signal, and to wade through, like you said, there's so much information out there, and it's not gameable, whereas I can pretend to tip my sock puppet lots of money and just go round and around tipping myself and not really doing any work, not really committing anything. I like Matterpool's idea. Hopefully it'll catch on at some point if people wake up.
Well, check it out.
You mean boostpow.com?
I haven't heard of that.
That's it.
Boost POW. Yeah, I read the write-up on that, and very, very impactful. All I gotta say is that's in my long-term plan for that's working. That's going to be worked on. Yeah, the peacock's tail type ideas are really what's going to get us out of this mess, if anything is.
Well, yeah, I mean, the peacock's tail is a perfect metaphor, because that's actually how in nature they filter out, you know what I mean? There's a certain cost. So the female peacock thinks she has a certain value, or she has a certain value, whether it's perceived or not. And she's only going to, she can't reproduce with everybody. And so she has to find the one that has the biggest tail. So the peacock's tail is like a way of filtering out unwanted noise. And so in a similar way, if you put on your attention, you put a certain price, and different people have different prices. Like the CEO of some really, important company is going to have a really large price if you want to get his or her attention. And so, then in order to break through all the noise, you have to pay a certain cost. And so, yeah, it's the perfect metaphor. I'm going to check that out.
The problem that I have with, okay, let me not say the problem, let me say the challenge that I have is, and it might just be with my understanding of the way that BoostPow or any of the ideas that Daniel Kravitz has put forward that I have with it, right? I struggle really hard with it. And I had an online chat with him once, and I think he got frustrated with me because I don't think he has a lot of patience for dumb people. So, but anyway, right? So I was trying really hard to understand how that product, how what he was talking about translates into a product. Where in my product does that actually fit in? is this just a feature, or is this the actual reason for being for my product? And whatever product it is that I'm building, right, I'm going to try and solve a user problem. And what problem of the user am I solving where I employ this technology that's going to, make it so that I can actually sell product and be profitable? And I couldn't figure it out. I could not. I tried speaking to him a little bit about it. Maybe I asked the wrong questions, but I'm still not sure what the product looks like that incorporates the ideas that he's putting forward. Very interesting ideas. I love the idea of evolutionary biology and all of the interesting things around signaling theory. It's super interesting, but I'm still completely incapable of understanding how it translates into any sort of product that can be built.
I haven't.
if somebody-
I just Googled it,
Yeah.
but I haven't even. That's the first time I heard of it, but it sounds cool, so I'll check it out. But I'm just talking more in general about how do we, like, if somebody has a ton of incoming comments, how do you even get through them? And right now they're all treated equally, and there's this sense that, oh, I have to answer all these if you're trying to be polite. But at some point, people just aren't polite and they just ignore them, and so that's kind of inhumane. Though then people have these psychological issues where people aren't answering their whatever, and they don't like it. And so there needs to be just a more humane way of filtering through these comments. And if somebody didn't read it, say this didn't get to them, instead of, and now finally there's a way of saying, at least on iOS, I've wanted this for years. It's like, say that this person, we need an away message on iMessage. I've sent them, emails, and finally we have a thing where it says notifications turned off. It's still kind of half-baked, but at least there's something. Because, in tribal cultures, which our brain really still operates out of, if you talk to somebody and they just ignore you, it's like, wow, like that's one of the rudest things ever. And it's really bad. And so just to have, questions going out, but not getting an immediate response. I've learned to just adapt to it, but it can cause issues for some people. So there just needs to be a better way of filtering through everything, and having a price, I think it's a viable way. And now that we have micropayments and everything, I think BSV can be a really good solution.
To address the product design kind of thing that was brought up, I think that, and this is one of these fundamental things that people solve by creating protocols, I would say, more than products. And then products are created that leverage these protocols or standards. Like the internet protocol was created to solve this problem, I guess, that it ended up solving. It's not necessarily a product, but in the protocol itself defined the sort of solution. And then when people started adapting that, or sort of adopting it into the things they were creating, we were able to do a lot of things that we weren't able to do before. So if we were to create a second generation of the internet, right, which incorporates micropayments, the protocols that are designed that people use to create their apps and websites, right? So the system by which people create products is right now the internet. And that's great for promoting access to information. That's what the internet solved. But in the second generation system of creating apps and websites, the metanet, right? That is on a protocol design level, something that needs to be addressed. And I think that one single product is not going to be able to address it. It needs to be a system of creating products and services like the internet is. And that's what we need to consciously will into being if we're going to succeed at solving these things, is we need to get all on the same page about standards and literally what is the method by which we create these things. And then there's an underlying philosophical reason why we do it. So, right, the web was, we're going to do it in this way and create a website instead of put a bulletin board up because of the philosophical reason that we want to have more people be able to access more information. And they did that. That's great. Now everybody can access I don't think anybody's going to debate that they solved that. But and now we have this system of creating apps that give people more access to more information. Amazing. But we need to create a system of creating apps and websites by the establishment of new standards and protocols through the metanet that enable those types of products to even be created. Because if I'm just creating one product, right? If I'm just creating one product that solves it in my specific way, that's not interoperable, and it's not going to attract many people. But just like how business owners need to create, not necessarily, the business owner does not need to create a product. The business owner needs to create a team and a system for creating that product. And we need to create a system, as well as, I guess, a team for creating these kinds of products and standards that run that. And if we can do that, then I think we can solve it. But I don't think it's going to be one company. It's going to have to be an agreement and an understanding about certain companies that believe certain philosophical beliefs, and they want to get together and really solve this and create a new ecosystem, a whole new marketplace for that sort of thing. And so I hope we can do that.
Funny thing is,
a good way to go to market with that. Go for it, Xiaohui.
Funny thing is, in the latest Bitcoin class, we talk about exactly the same this topic. If you haven't watched it, I think it's going to be out on YouTube for free today. I think, or maybe already be out. So
I always have to watch this a few times. The first time I get about a 10% comprehension, and then the second time I get about 20 or 30%. And then once I watch it enough, I'm like, all right, I understand.
10 is very high.
But I already
Seriously.
watched it, but I had to. I usually have it on in the background the first time I watch it. So I've done the first time, but I haven't done the comprehension part yet. So I'll watch it again this afternoon.
I always watch those when they come out on YouTube, but I haven't watched them on Streamanity yet.
Is it?
I've been doing the Streamanity lately. What's that, Stefan?
Sorry, I was asking Xiaohui, is it the one about Uber without Uber Inc.?
Yeah, basically you build a instead of like centralized companies.
But,
okay.
Think about you build like a
little
transportation
bit more clear on
product.
that. Right. Okay, I remember that. But honestly, and this is something that I think was talked about a lot in the early days of Ethereum was, oh, we're gonna just replace all these things. Ha ha ha, we don't need them. But I mean, Uber does so much more than just providing, like they have these huge amounts of like insurance that they have to do to cover the riders. Like there's a lot that they do. But I think what it's not going to replace Uber. It's just going to make the ride matching part more interoperable. You know what I mean? I don't know. What do you think, Xiaohui? Like you're not going to just replace a company with a protocol. That's a really kind of misleading thing.
No,
and
I think it's
caused a lot of confusion in the early days of Ethereum.
Yeah, that's why when I first get in crypto, I thought that was what that objective is. Basically, the so-called get rid of the middleman, right?
Yeah, me too. Exactly.
Yeah, or decentralize whatever, do X without X. So basically, for now, after I listened to Craig, I think it's more like think about the analogy. I think Tai also mentioned, Stefan just mentioned. So think about internet, right? This TCP/IP. Instead of like having this open protocol which everybody can build on, think about just one company, right? I don't know the name. Maybe it's just called Internet Corporation. They own the IP and the TCP/IP, so everybody has to go through them. Can you imagine the internet? I think it may be still around, but I would imagine will not be as prevalent as today. The same for Uber.
Is it called the Internet? Is it called the Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers?
Pretty much.
Because you just described something that does actually. I can. Yes, that does exist.
Yes. So what I'm saying is, instead of doing that, like what Uber, right, or somebody else can do is, I think that's my understanding. Basically, you have a transportation. Basically, they solve the transportation issue, right? So instead of having this centralized company doing that, you have this transportation protocol, right? Maybe you have passengers who want to have some ride and going from A to B, and then you have drivers who have the capacity to drive A to B, and they submit different orders, right? It's almost like a marketplace protocol, but you have this protocol, you can define, what's the format for this, how you request ride, how you accept rides, and then Uber, they can also build on top of it. It's open protocol, right? But Lyft also build, so do anybody else. They can also build, whoever. It's like almost like a Twitch thing, right? You have the same data, but then everybody can build on top of it because everything is open. So that can have many more benefits, right? For example, one is the drivers, they don't have to install all kinds of apps. They have access. So I think the market operates at a much more efficient rate, right? So instead of you want to have your silo, I want to have your silo, you can have a more efficient marketplace. Also, I mean, this is a growing problem, but basically sometimes you have I think Uber maybe less often, but some other other platform, they can de-platform you, right? So they always say they have a user agreement, but it's never explicit, right? So it's like, oh, this is against our community guidelines. What is this? Nobody knows, right? It's like nobody knows. It's all up to somebody else. So for example, Uber, right? Now you imagine, right? If you don't have certain things that can lock you out, then you cannot even travel, right? So instead of just like an open protocol, so at least you can have alternatives. They can always compete. So that's how I feel.
Mhm.
And also probably it's going to be a much lower fee if you have then all the drivers, right? More drivers come in. So it's similar like all the so-called, all this peer-to-peer gig. And when they first started, like Airbnb and Uber, they're very competitive price-wise, right? With let's say taxis or hotels. But now, I don't know, have you stayed in something like Airbnb recently? It's not necessarily cheaper than hotels. So that's another. Basically, you have more supplies, right? If you can more supplies, hopefully the price will be cheaper, which is good for the end users.
Yeah. So I guess what would happen, I don't know how it evolved to that place, but I guess what would happen is somebody introduces a protocol saying, here's a network of people that are broadcasting that they need a ride from point A to point B, and it's all within that protocol. And then different apps would somehow supply the user interface. I just don't, I like the idea, and I can see how it would be great to have all these people competing on the user interface, but how do we get from where we are now to that point? And I think it is going to take kind of what Ty was saying, where there needs to be a bunch of people that agree to this. So somebody first has to create the protocol, or people have to agree upon it, and then you have to have these competing user interface things. But the other interesting thing about that idea is that a lot of times, like, things evolve. So it wasn't just text, or like Twitter used to just be just text, but now you could put images in there and videos. And so if you have too restrictive of a protocol, it might lead to some problems. But I guess you could have an agreement where people change the protocol, or
Yeah, I mean,
I don't know. That's a complicated issue.
I guess the protocols would need to be able to evolve, but with backwards compatibility, sort of. I mean, there would be a very large incentive to have backwards compatibility. So we would have like a tweet protocol, text only, and then there'd be another protocol for images, and then or tweet with image protocol, TWIP, whatever, and then the text. I mean, like I said, there would need to be a strong incentive. I mean, there would be a strong incentive around backwards compatibility, but then if there's something so kind of revolutionary that comes out that changes everything, then it's a question of, okay, well, now we have a whole new system or a whole new way of doing this, right? So different protocols would lead to different, I guess, they wouldn't be silos, but they would be marketplaces. And then those marketplaces would actually compete with one another as well. So we'd have a marketplace built around protocol A for social networks, and then a marketplace UIs competing on protocol B for social networks. And I guess that is something that could happen and is worthy, of consideration. I don't know what a good solution to that would be, but I mean, hopefully we can evolve and have backwards compatibility. Smart protocol designers will design in the versioning and such so that they can do backwards, so that things are as backwards compatible as possible, and forwards compatible, of course, where possible. But yeah, I mean, how do we usher this in? We got to build some things, and hopefully I can motivate some people to build with my what I'm going to talk about at CoinGeek, and I'm just going to keep building the tools to make it happen. And Xiaohui, you're doing a very good thing by building these tools to make it happen as well. And a lot of the other people in this space, we just need to show the merits of this for people, right? Just why is this important from a philosophical perspective? Even like, why should people believe in this technology as an important thing that can make their lives better? And the first step in that is getting people to agree that there is a problem, that our current ways of doing things need to change. And if we can get people to agree that there is a problem, that's the first step on getting them to agree, maybe we should get together and find a better solution to these sorts of things. That's the way that I think about it, at least.
Yeah.
I just had a, okay, go ahead.
Sorry. No, I was just going to
That's
say, Kevin, that this idea of protocols and of building protocols, that it sounds like it'd be a really good fit for the platform cooperative movement, who is already a group of highly motivated individuals and organizations and groups of individuals who are sort of looking for new ways to break out of the dominance of the big tech platforms, and who are looking at cooperative ways of building platforms that are both open source, are given away for free, but which can also be used to as commercial platforms to make money in any sort of local area. So the platform cooperative movement, I think, would probably be a really good road to take for building open protocols that supplant the existing closed platforms that we currently have.
Nice. Yeah, I also just even I was thinking too, like even at a basic level, if we like right now when you use Facebook, they're extracting all of the value. So you create your content, they put ads on your page or on your feed or whatever, but still your content is being monetized, but you don't get any of the value. And so it's kind of like being on a feudal lord's ranch or whatever, where you have to pay your taxes and stuff, and you don't really get any money that you could use anywhere outside of you don't even get money, you just get protection. And so you get to live on this land. But nowadays we don't live in these feudal castles. If I want to move from San Diego to New York, I can pick up and move, and I get to take all of my money that I've earned in San Diego and then spend it in New York. Whereas in the past, if you went from a castle to a castle, you'd have to start fresh and you'd lose all of your reputation. You'd basically be a nobody in the new castle. But now with money, all my reputation, if you think of money in terms of reputation, like all of this work that I've done to establish my, whatever you want to call money, if you want to call it reputation, perhaps, or network. If you think about profit as like what I've done to help other people. So your network of how much reputation or how much profit you've created for yourself, and thereby by helping other people, you can take that to a different city and it stays with you, right? And so that's like super awesome. And so even if we don't have all these open protocols, I want there to be other open protocols, but even at a basic level, if you are actually earning money on one platform and then you can kind of pick up and go to another one, that might be some sort of advancement. But also, like, let's say you earn some, maybe there's an NFT, and I know that's such a silly buzzword, but just like, let's think of it as some sort of reward or badge or reputation thing. that stays with you, and other platforms tie into it. That might be something that that can start this move towards an open protocol. But yeah, I think there should be incentive for the person that's creating the base layer. I don't know. I mean, obviously there has been examples, I guess, with some open source things, but I always feel very uncomfortable if the person isn't properly incentivized to supply my foundation, because then I don't feel like it's a solid foundation. But I don't know.
Is anyone here
So
familiar
that's
with
just
like Gravatar? These things where you have your email and it just puts like a profile photo or something, and you have your Gravatar across the whole internet, kind of.
I've heard of it, yeah, and there's some Bitcoin apps I think that use it, or I don't know.
It's
Maybe
not
that's
really.
something
I don't know.
else,
I don't
but-
even know if it's like Bitcoin related, but basically this idea is, and this is like the first incremental step away from the existing. Like they have this, and they are, I believe, I could be completely wrong, but I believe they are kind of a central place where you go to have your, you put your email, and then it like has your Gravatar profile. I don't know very much about it, except that it works across these different platforms. And so you can have your
Right.
Gravatar, and then you update your profile photo or something, and it like puts your new avatar on all the places where you're using your Gravatar. So that's a thing that's like it's pretty widely adopted. I think it's like on a couple different major sites that use those sorts of things. And I think that I mean that sort of thing can begin to sort of provide the little tiny glitch in the matrix, if you will, for people like, wait a second, maybe I can be more than one platform, and maybe what I am can exist across things, and maybe I can start to own that.
Yeah, no, that's a good example. It's like your profile picture, like it's something that you generally will just use one of, but then you have to keep on re-uploading it in all these different data silos.
Right.
But if you could just have your profile picture that they all plug into, that you change once and it updates, that's very useful.
Right.
So there could be stuff like that.
Did an unwriter build something, or somebody build this on top of him? I kind of remember I used this.
Yes.
I upload. Yeah. I forget the
Unwriter
name. Yeah. Basically, you upload one, and then you can act with the profile picture for all your like MoneyButton or whatever. RelayX.
Yeah, I think
profile
that's
picture,
what I was
something.
talking about.
Mhm.
That's what I talked about the first time. I don't know if it was, what was the one tie, Imgur or something? I don't know, or no, it wasn't. I forget
Gravatar
what
is
one
the
you
one that
mentioned.
I
Oh, Gravatar, yeah. No, it was something similar to that, but I'm pretty sure it's a Bitcoin thing that a bunch of the Bitcoin apps were using. So yeah, that's a good example, and that could be how things morph. But there has to be demand from the the customers are saying, why aren't you using this? And it's possible, but I don't see the clear path of how that would happen yet, but I'm sure that I'll see a path or something eventually. But yeah, open protocols are totally awesome because you get the competitive capitalist nature, and things will improve and it'll be great.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't really
I don't have much else to say.
Can I ask?
Yeah. I mean,
Go
I
ahead,
think
Tom.
we've been going
Go
for a
ahead.
little while, but I mean,
Yeah.
We have a
Okay.
newcomer in
So,
the house.
I have a
Hi.
Hi,
Welcome.
everybody.
Hi.
Hey.
Thank you. So, my first question is MoneyButton the main? Is it an exchange for BSV, or is it just a wallet? And also, are there any exchanges that are specifically denominated in BSV as opposed to BTC? And that's my question.
Okay. So first, MoneyButton itself
There's a
is.
few. I'll let you go, Chawa.
You go. Okay, you go ahead.
No, I said you know better. You know better than me. So
Okay,
I'm
I will
just gonna
say
let you
first,
talk.
and I probably missed something. You guys can tell me. So first of all, welcome here. What's your name?
Thank you. William.
William.
I was
Oh,
in the
okay.
chat recently.
Okay, welcome. So first, MoneyButton is just a non-custodial wallet, but also is now being acquired by a parent company called Fabric. So they are BSV denominated major exchange, Fabric. if you search
I know.
about it. Yes, there's some other. I think it's a float SV. That's also a major BSV exchange that I think is denominated mostly in SV, BSV. And that's the latest one. I
Okay.
think probably you heard about causing a lot of buzz in the BSV space called token swap, basically so-called decentralized exchange called DEX.
Oh,
So
yeah.
that's another one.
Mhm.
So
Now,
that's,
does token swap utilize sCrypt at all, or no?
yes, it's completely based on sCrypt. It's the first app. I think it is purely based on sCrypt. I think a lot of other projects they use sCrypt as a part of it, but now this one is one that's completely written in sCrypt. The thing about it is like a Uniswap.
Wow.
So instead of
Yep.
Uniswap written in Solidity, is token swap written in sCrypt. So you can support all kind of fancy stuff.
So Uniswap utilized some sort of unique method to get market makers. I had infographics of it, but basically it seemed like what they were able to do was to get that market maker automated. Is that the word I'm looking for?
That's
To
called
be able
AMM.
to-
They call it automatic market maker. That's the type of so-called exchanges. They're called market maker, but it's automatic instead of like based on humans, and there is based on algorithms. So it's different different market maker. They have different algorithms.
Okay. Okay. Alrighty. And so I've been looking at what's on chain. That's the primary block explorer I use. Is that from sCrypt, or is that from
That's from
Tau? Are those
that's
two
from
different
Tau.
things?
Originally they're independent, but then they're later acquired by Tau. They're the first, I think it is the first block explorer after the split. Yes, but now it's part of Tau.
Are they owned by nChain, or is that
They're owned by Tau.
Because they're
They're owned by
All
Tau.
distributed.
Yes.
It's a public company in
Yes.
Canada, correct?
Yeah, it's a public Canadian company.
Canadian.
So I look at what they're doing right now as like, I mean, if BSV was like the world economy, they're like the Federal Reserve in terms of what they provide, and like with the mining and being able to, I don't exactly know everything that they do. I just know that they went all out in purchasing mining equipment for BSV. And I've seen the 2 gigabyte blocks. What I don't understand about the gigabyte blocks is it just there's stuff in UTXOs together, which allows it to, because I've seen big blocks get mined where there's not a lot of transactions, and it kind of varies. I try to, could you speak on that at all, or?
Yeah, so basically that, I mean, just by math, there are two ways. Usually you can generate big blocks, right? Because blocks consist of transactions, and then transactions contain some data. Either you can have a lot of transactions, but each transaction is small, or you can have just what you said, a few transactions, but each one is huge. So usually what happens is, so if in the latter case, a lot of people put the so-called data into the blockchain, like a false return type of thing. So basically they may put some picture or even video. So you only have a few transactions, but each one is huge. So that's one. Another is you can also have a lot of, I think sometimes I forget, I don't know, the recent ones I haven't analyzed. It's a 2 gigabytes. You have seen them. Is it many transactions? Is just a few? I haven't analyzed them yet.
I
okay.
noticed, the mining reward is bigger than the actual block that's being mined. And I look at stuff like that, and I take everything with a grain of salt, but I see that and I just say like, so BSV is so far ahead of what the entire world considers like what Bitcoin is. They think it's BTC. Maybe you heard of Bitcoin Cash. If you know what Bitcoin Gold is, maybe you know about BSV, and that's
okay.
And most people don't, and I think they don't understand the value and what that is. I'm trying to utilize like the very deep technical part of Bitcoin, but it's not just computer programming. It's a lot of different things. And I realized I wasn't training myself when I was younger to get all that knowledge that I need. So that's why I'm here. But what else? I'm sorry, I'm done. I'm sorry.
Yeah, rest be sure. I think nobody has
There's a new thing that there's a new thing. It's learn.script.io that you might want to check out. They just released it.
So I was using,
But yeah, it's all very new. There's a lot of people, including myself, that are just still learning. So
right.
but yeah, it requires a lot of kind of deep understanding about how the UTXO system works and how everything works. And so it'll be a long term, but once somebody makes better education, then it'll be easier. But
well, that's kind of honest. I look at it because I've been dealing with Solidity for about, I'd say, a year and a half. I got in on this like a boot camp program. It basically threw everything at me of what Solidity is, how this all works. Started working with Engine, if you ever heard of Engine Coin and what they're doing, and started using the SDKs that they have available on Unity, the video game development software. They partnered with Engine to make an SDK, and I mean, I was under the impression that, like, all right, I'm going to use Ethereum, I'm going to use Engine, I'll leverage all these things, I'll put it together, we'll get the game out, we can do the NFT sales, yada yada yada. What ended up happening is that I would say, like, between January and April, it got to a point of like unusability, where like the whole thing, it was so disheartening to a point where I'm like, oh, so this stuff can't exist. The reason why these games haven't existed is because it can exist with something like this. And I look at, what I learned in Solidity. Is sCrypt similar to Solidity in terms of how it okay. That's what
it's similar, but one of the things we started with too was that it's a different, like, the account-based model is much different. But it's a similar idea. So sorry to interrupt, Chawei.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, it's I think there are two aspects. I think one way, just Kevin just talked about, the programming model is a little different. One is so-called Solidity is based on account model. So based on each contract, it has its own count. Then the address is fixed and never changes. Versus the Ethereum Bitcoin uses the so-called UTXO model. So that's one aspect. Another aspect is if you just look at the superficial at the syntax level. So if you look at the Solidity code and you look at the sCrypt code, it looks very, very similar. And that's also by definition, by design choice, because I want to, either you are like a web developer from JavaScript or Python or JavaScript, right, whatever. And you also, or you are like a blockchain developer from Solidity. I want to feel you don't feel like too difficult to grasp. I think if you it's pretty readable. I don't know, have you take a look at it, but it's kind of similar to Solidity in terms of syntax. Yes.
And because of that, and because my whole specialty in the game that I was designing was that there was such a dynamic system of these micropayment fee commissions that would transfer between NFT and fungible token. I mean, I personally, in my opinion, it has nothing to do with me. I think the idea came through my experience in cryptocurrency, in trading and programming, to a point where this idea seems like it is applicable beyond the current understanding of what an NFT is, what a fungible token is, how does blockchain have scalability? They talk about $1 million Bitcoin, but it's like, well, how could you see it like that? And I see it as, if this gets implemented into like another layer. And I wanted to ask, in relation to the stash token, which is a layer 0, is sCrypt a token standard? It seems more like it's a scripting language, which it is, but I get fuzzy.
So so a very good analogy. You think about sCrypt is Solidity, right? So like stars or any other token or sensible token is like ERC20, ERC721. It is all these tokens that implement using sCrypt, but they are independent. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
Yes, it does.
Will, have you
So-
heard of Fix Gaming?
FYX.
Yes.
Crypto fight? Yeah,
Yes.
see, I've been playing crypto fights for the past. I mean, personally, I'm not. I like making video games. I don't necessarily like playing video games, but like, and I don't really like playing that game, but I have played it, and it's a grind, but that's okay. I think to me, it gave me so much hope to see that, and I was gonna reach out to them, but I'm so scared of like bad actors coming in and just like taking everything I've worked on, taking all my ideas. 'Cause I don't have lawyers, I don't have like big money like that, to where they'll just rip it from me, push me out, and then I'm just sitting there like the Winklevoss twins without a Harvard degree. So you know what I mean? It's hard to
Yeah,
you
always
work in
protect
this place
yourself.
because
Yes.
it- you know,
Yeah.
I mean, it's like I say, I honor what I don't know, and I try to see like, all right, what is knowable and what is unknowable. And to me, it seems like it is unknowable if this gains traction. The bad actors, how many could come in and try and like rip it to pieces. So to me, it's like, all right, get all the technicals, get every little bit, all the details, make sure it works in beta. Don't even talk about it. And when everything's good to go to market, then you start to market it, because then there's this level of like accountability.
Yeah.
I could mint my NFTs that I have right now, give you the lore, give you the story, say, give me this X amount of money, and I could do that. But like, I'm not a piece of shit. Excuse my language, but like, I'm not
That's
trying
okay.
to rip people off. I'm trying to make something real. And there's so many people that are so. It's like when you meet 5 guys and they've been together for 5 years working on something, that's their project where they're going to make money. Like if you come in, you're just a tool to them. You're not like a part of them. So they're not going to involve you in that situation, if that makes sense. But, like you said, the educational tools could get a little bit better with this, but, this is to be expected with something so new. So.
Have you checked out the
Yeah.
Bitcoin Association's courses? There's a couple of them on the Academy.
Yeah.
Um,
I actually, I'm gonna pull it. I'm glad you say that, because I got a whiteboard that says like the things I need to just like go and read and get through, and that's one of those things.
Yeah, I recommend the Bitcoin SV Academy courses. They would help with getting some understandings of this stuff, and then from there, sCrypt and just go on up the tech stack, right? Figure out the details so you understand everything, and then from there you can be able to implement your ideas. Figuring out how do you do the state of whatever you want to model for your game, modeling that inside of a what's called a UTXO in Bitcoin, right? And then defining the constraints by which people can interact with your game by updating that state and paying out money or paying in money into the contract. All that stuff is, you just got to figure out how to implement that.
That's genius stuff. I wanted to ask in terms of like if token swap can exist the way that it exists right now. I think of things like Maker. I think of things like what was it? YFI. And it goes back. I think you said it. I think it was that you create protocols, you leverage the protocols, and that in the cryptocurrency state, that's what I look at those things. That's how they relate to DeFi. With BSV, in terms of years, how new is this? When did you guys get involved?
I just got involved, let's see, how long ago? I guess it was it was right after CoinGeek 2020, I think. It was once sCrypt got started, and then I actually saw, I understand that I could use this stuff for something. But I had been following the space for basically since 2015-ish, ever since Craig started talking, but then they branched off into Bitcoin Cash and then BSV. But even once they started with BSV, I didn't know what I would use this for. But then once I think it was the CoinGeek sCrypt presentation in London, I'm like, oh wow, smart contracts on I try not to use that word anymore, but smart contracts on Bitcoin SV, perfect. But I just think of it as programmable money. So
Isn't that what
there's
smart
locking
contract is?
scripts.
Excuse me, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
There's locking scripts and unlocking scripts, right? And so with every transaction, you have these locking scripts, and that's traditionally in Bitcoin. Well, it still is in Bitcoin script, which is this like assembly language that's really difficult to write. You know what I mean? Like it's like assembly language. It's like nobody writes a program in assembly language. But then sCrypt is just a higher level language that then compiles into that assembly language. And so, yeah, exactly. And so you can use it to write human readable locking scripts, basically, is the way I think of it.
Okay.
So, but every transaction, you have locking scripts, unlocking scripts. In most normal transactions, that's just pay to public key hash, right, guys?
Right.
And so then, and so people just say, you know, what's your public address? And they use that to create a locking script. And that's just like the default, that's the default locking script. But if you want to write custom locking scripts, then you could either use Bitcoin script, but that's way too complicated. And so instead we use sCrypt that then compiles into that assembly language. So yeah, it's not a token protocol. That's the question you asked earlier. It's just a way of writing, you could call them smart contracts, or you could call them lock-in scripts for Bitcoin SV.
Well,
It's like C, and then it compiles to x86.
It's like C,
There
and
you go.
then it compiles to what?
To x86 assembler, right?
Okay.
Or if you are
You know
coming
what
from
it
Ethereum world, right? They have a EVM. Ethereum virtual machine has a bytecode, right? So Bitcoin script is a bytecode, and Solidity is a sCrypt.
Right.
So it's the same. Even you look at the
Now-
bytecode, it's almost the same with the script.
Okay. Is now the byte, does that go in through the stacks? Because the opcodes are performing recursion on the stacks. That's from what I got through some of the learning material. It looks like at the deeper level that the I'll stop.
Yeah, that's fine.
All right.
So basically, both have virtual machines, right? So Ethereum has a Ethereum virtual machine. Bitcoin has a Bitcoin Ethereum virtual machine, but virtual machines has instructions, right? So it's all bytecode because usually it's just 1 byte. So Ethereum they have bytecode, but also for Bitcoin we also have bytecode, right? This bytecode, Satoshi name it, call it Bitcoin script, but it's essentially almost the same thing. It's like a Java virtual machine. It's the same thing. Look at the opcode. You have add, you have shift, you have doing say modular. It's almost the same. You also have some like a primitive, like a building function, like a SHA-256 or something. It's almost the same if you look at the virtual machine level.
It's gonna blow up. You know, it's gonna get very big because of what this is. I mean, I'm sure you know that.
Oh yeah, that's the fun part.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what we're here for, right?
That's why exactly. Like you guys are wizards, you know, to do, but you know that. I have something on my wall. It says that to connect to the Ethereum blockchain, you need a JavaScript program, Java program, Python programs, a Web3 interface, JSON RPC. You got to get to the EVM client, which has a local copy, which exists on the blockchain, and that connects to the thing. Does that all make sense in terms of what a blockchain is?
Yeah, you have the same thing on
Okay,
Bitcoin
now-
with one big exchange, with one big exception. I think it's a huge difference, which makes us completely different from Ethereum. You don't need to run a local node, so you can just talk to the miners through APIs. That's the benefit. Yes, everything else is you have SDKs, JavaScript, whatever. You have APIs, you have virtual machines. It's all same, but you don't have to run a big local copy. You don't need to.
No need to wait that 2 weeks to sync up the state.
I remember when I first installed those, and it's like, okay, well,
Death node, whatever.
I literally had to wait like a few days. I think it was.
Run
And
your
it
own
just kept on
node.
getting worse.
Yeah, support your network.
Yep,
Yes.
run your own node. I'm so embarrassed. I look at some of those videos and I'm like, oh my gosh, that I did because I like taught people how to sync their, oh my God. I thought about just deleting it, but then I don't know. Maybe someday I will.
I
But
mean, we'll be
it's
all
still
be there. So
all right, you guys. Yeah, I know. I remember in the first sCrypt meetup that you did, it was in person, but you recorded it and you made a joke like, yeah, I did Ethereum one time.
yeah,
And
everybody
I'm
been
like,
there.
oh yeah. Well, I'm like busted. Yeah, I'm busted because it's still there on the internet.
Fortunately, I was
Anyways,
spared
guys, this
from
was
that.
fun, but I haven't eaten it. It's been 2 hours, so I gotta
Oh, okay.
run. But
Okay, that's fine.
Thanks,
It's good
guys.
enough, I think.
I mean, I could hang out some more, but I just is if we have just
That's fine.
predictability, it's going to be an hour, 2 hours or something because I just
Okay.
can't go on forever. But
I think
But
yeah,
I
this
want to
this
stay
one
and
being long enough.
chat to you guys. But
That's fine.
Mhm.
We can stop
I'm gonna
today
drop off
and
as well.
we'll talk next time. William, if you have any questions, you are in
Yep,
our
if you
Slack,
have-
right? You are in the Slack, right?
I'm on
In our
Slack.
Slack. Yeah,
I'm on
ask
Slack.
anything.
cool.
We also post show notes. So anything, we can talk there.
Okay.
Or otherwise, we can see you next Friday.
Okay.
Okay, nice talking,
See you
man,
next
gentlemen.
Friday.
Okay, enjoy
All
the
right.
rest of the day.
Thank you.
Good
Okay,
to meet
Take
you.
care.
See you
Okay.
guys.
see you.
Thank you,
Bye.
5 and 7.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Bye.